Joseph and Carol's relationship developed quickly, almost like a fairy tale. From the moment they locked eyes across a crowded room, they felt an immediate connection. The 13-year age difference between them didn't seem important next to the strong bond they shared. Joseph, a successful architect, was drawn to Carol's lively personality and elegance. Her energy and zest for life were captivating. Carol, a hopeful interior designer, admired Joseph's confidence and sense of stability. His calm nature made her feel safe and loved in a way she had never experienced before. After only 3 months of dating, Joseph took Carol by surprise with a romantic proposal during a weekend trip to the mountains. He had rented a private cabin with an incredible view of the towering peaks. They had a wonderful time, enjoying delicious meals that cost $40 a portion, hiking through the mountains, and almost falling into a freezing stream. Overall, it was a lot of fun. As they sat on the balcony, watching the sunset, Joseph knelt down and presented her with a ring featuring a large diamond. With tears of happiness in her eyes, Carol eagerly said yes. They got married in a small ceremony surrounded by their closest friends and family, marking the beginning of their joyful life together. Looking for a fresh start, Joseph and Carol decided to leave the busy city behind and move to the peaceful town of Willowbrook. They found a charming old Victorian house on a quiet street lined with trees. It had lots of potential, even though it needed some work. They were excited to transform it into their perfect home. Joseph immediately pictured turning the attic into an office overlooking the garden, and he also wanted to create a great barbecue space in the backyard. Carol, meanwhile, was eager to design the perfect kitchen where she could prepare her favorite dishes. The first few weeks in their new home were filled with happiness and excitement. Joseph threw himself into DIY projects, fixing the cracked walls and worn floors. Carol focused on decorating, filling each room with beautiful pieces she found at local antique shops. Her design skills turned their simple house into a beautiful, cozy home. The renovations were expensive, but Joseph and Carol didn't mind too much. What worried them more was that they hoped nothing would break. But then the plumbing issues started. It all began with the kitchen faucet, an old brass fixture that Joseph thought gave the place character. One morning, while Carol was making coffee, the faucet suddenly began to hiss and leak, spraying water everywhere. Carol suggested calling Joseph's friend Carl, who was a plumber. Joseph thought it was a bit strange that Carol wanted Carl to come instead of just calling a regular plumber. Carl, who was muscular and a bit rough around the edges but friendly, came over and quickly fixed the faucet. Carol thanked him repeatedly and even sent him off with a batch of homemade chocolate chip cookies. Joseph laughed, thinking she was going a bit overboard for a simple repair. Over the next few months, the faucet broke repeatedly, and each time, Carol called Carl to fix it, often without telling Joseph beforehand. At first, Joseph didn't think it was a big deal, assuming that she just trusted Carl's skills. However, he began to notice little things that made him uneasy. Carol would sometimes get dizzy and struggle to get out of bed. But when Carl was around, she seemed to light up, laughing at his jokes and chatting with him in a way Joseph had never seen before. They exchanged glances and casual touches that felt oddly private. Joseph's stomach churned, but he tried to convince himself that he was being paranoid. Then, the bathroom sink started to act up, and the shower head began spraying water in every direction. There was always something wrong, and Carol always wanted to call Carl to fix it instead of letting Joseph take care of it. By now, Carl was at their house multiple times a week, sometimes staying longer than necessary to finish the job. Carol would make him lemonade, and they'd chat and laugh together while he worked, as if Joseph wasn't even there. Joseph's discomfort grew. He tried bringing it up to Carol once, saying they were relying on Carl too much. She quickly shot down the idea, accusing him of being jealous and imagining things. This led to their first serious argument, and from that point, tension started to build in their relationship. The situation came to a breaking point one day when Joseph came home early from work, planning to surprise Carol with flowers and expensive wine, hoping to smooth over their recent tension. But what he found instead shocked him. When he walked in, he saw Carol and Carl in the middle of an affair on the kitchen table, right next to the leaky faucet. The wave of emotions that hit Joseph was overwhelming: betrayal, anger, despair. He couldn't believe his eyes. The woman he loved, the one he had trusted, was with another man in their home. In that instant, everything he had hoped for was destroyed. He dropped the flowers and clenched his fist, nearly striking Carl, who quickly ran to the corner by the fridge. Carol collapsed to the floor, scared of his reaction. Joseph wanted to smash everything in the kitchen, from the dishes to the refrigerator. His anger had no limits, But instead of doing that, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Carol chased after him, frantically trying to pull on her clothes and explain herself. She begged him to stop, tears flowing, but Joseph wasn't in the mood to listen. He jumped into his car and drove off, not knowing where he was going. He felt like his heart had been ripped open, bleeding with pain. After hours of driving aimlessly, Joseph ended up at a dive bar on the edge of town. He needed something strong to dull the pain. As he sipped whiskey, he scrolled through his phone contacts, wondering who he could talk to. The idea of being alone was unbearable. Then he saw Clara's name, Carol's childhood best friend. Without much thought, Joseph called her, feeling overwhelmed by his emotions, and broke down, choking on his words as he cried. Clara listened patiently, then suggested meeting up to talk in person. Needing someone to lean on, Joseph agreed, unaware that his decision would only make things more complicated. They spent hours talking, with each drink loosening his mind and making the conversation harder to follow. After one more drink, he slurred the words, "What is she?" before passing out, his head falling into Clara's lap. Clara called a cab and took him to the nearest hotel, where he could sleep off the alcohol until morning. The next morning was rough. Joseph woke up with a bad hangover. He had planned to go for some fresh air and met Clara at a quiet coffee shop outside town. As soon as Joseph saw the pity in Clara's eyes, he lost control. He broke down again, crying uncontrollably as he described the painful details of what he had witnessed, his body trembling with emotion. Clara held his hand and gave him tissues, letting him vent, though deep down, she felt guilty for keeping the secret. Once Joseph calmed down, Clara dropped a bombshell. She had known about Carol's affair for months. It had all started when she accidentally saw Carol and Carl together in a compromising situation. Carol had begged her to keep it a secret, claiming it was a one-time mistake and that she would eventually tell Joseph herself. Carol had even threatened to cut Clara out of her life if she told Joseph. Clara apologized for her silence. It was clear that the guilt had been eating at her. They spent hours talking, moving from the coffee shop to a nearby park bench when the shop closed. It was easy for Clara to open up to him. After all, she had always felt a soft spot for him. She was a great listener and truly understood his pain, offering comfort when he needed it most. In a moment of vulnerability and heightened emotions, things between them escalated, and that night, they ended up in bed together at Joseph's hotel. The next morning, Joseph was overwhelmed by guilt. What had he done? His life was already a mess, and now he had made it worse by sleeping with Carol's best friend. How could he condemn Carol for her infidelity and then turn around and do the same thing? He felt like a hypocrite. Clara reassured him, saying that everyone makes mistakes, especially when grieving, and no one needed to know. But deep down, Joseph knew he had to face Carol. No, they both needed to confront what had happened. When Joseph returned home, Carol was in a state of complete distress. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hair was disheveled, as if she hadn't slept at all. She immediately rushed to him, clinging to him and pouring out a jumble of apologies through her tears. She begged him for forgiveness, swore she would never see Carl again, and promised to make their marriage work. Part of Joseph still wanted to believe her. He loved her, despite everything. But then he noticed a hickey on her neck, one he certainly hadn't given her. A bitter laugh escaped him as he realized, even now, as she apologized tearfully, she was still lying. The image of Clara in the arms of her lover flashed through his mind, only adding to his guilt. Without hesitation, Joseph looked Carol in the eye and said, "I slept with Clara last night." Carol's face went pale, and she began to shake with anger. She lunged at Joseph, hitting his chest with her fists and screaming insults, calling him a hypocrite. Joseph stood still, taking the hits, feeling numb. When Carol's anger finally subsided, Joseph told her calmly that their marriage was over, and he would contact a divorce lawyer the next morning. Carol threatened to take everything from him, to ruin his reputation, to make him regret ever crossing her. The full force of her vindictiveness came out. Joseph just shook his head and walked away, unable to continue this painful conversation. He went to a hotel, deciding it was time to begin rebuilding his life. To his surprise, the divorce process moved quickly and with little conflict, despite Carol's earlier threats. Maybe she realized her own infidelity left her with little moral high ground in the divorce. They divided their joint assets nearly 50-50 and went their separate ways. Joseph rented a small but cozy apartment near his new job. At first, living alone after so many years of marriage felt strange, but he soon began to appreciate the benefits. No one criticized him for staying late at work or meeting friends after hours. He could watch his favorite movies without hearing any comments. And, most importantly, there were no more lies, suspicions, or guilt. Joseph threw himself into his work, avoiding his empty apartment as much as he could. He took on extra projects, spoke at conferences, and flew on business trips. His colleagues joked that he had become a workaholic. But for Joseph, it was a way to fill the emptiness in his life. Plus, the success in his career helped restore his self-esteem after his marriage fell apart. On the rare free evenings, Joseph met up with Clara. At first, it felt awkward for both of them after what had happened, but eventually, the friendly connection returned. Clara was there for him, helping him adjust to his new life, keeping him company during walks and at cafes. Slowly, Joseph began to realize he felt more for her than just friendship. He remembered the soft way she touched him, the taste of her lips. But each time he stopped himself. It was too soon. He hadn't fully healed from his divorce. One evening, as they sat at a restaurant, Joseph decided to bring up his feelings. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he admitted that he valued Clara deeply as a friend, but sometimes he thought about more. He said that maybe, when he was ready for a new relationship, they could try being a couple if she felt the same way. Clara placed her hand over his and smiled warmly. She said she understood completely. After a divorce, it took time to trust again, and she enjoyed being with him too. But she wasn't ready for a serious relationship yet. However, if they both wanted to be together someday, she would be happy to see where it led. For now, she suggested they let things unfold naturally. Joseph sighed in relief, grateful for her understanding. It felt good to be understood without needing to say too much. Months passed, and Joseph adjusted to his new life as a bachelor. He found a peaceful rhythm. But then, out of nowhere, Carol reappeared. One evening, she showed up at his apartment, drunk and furious. She began shouting that he had ruined her life, that she had lost everything because of him. She wouldn't let him off the hook so easily. Joseph tried to reason with her, reminding her that they had already settled everything in the divorce. But Carol wasn't listening. In her rage, she hurled a vase at him, shattering it. Then she tried to attack him with her fists, but Joseph managed to grab her wrists. Carol collapsed into sobs, her body going limp as she cried uncontrollably. Through her hiccups, she pleaded that she still loved Joseph, that she wanted to start fresh. He understood that Carol was deeply hurt and scared, but he knew there was no turning back to the life they once had. The next day, Joseph changed the locks on his doors and installed an alarm system. He was worried Carol might try something else. And he was right. Over the next few weeks, Carol bombarded him with angry messages and letters, accusing him of everything under the sun. She posted hateful things on his Facebook page and once even showed up at his workplace, causing a scene in front of his colleagues and clients. Security had to escort her out, but the discomfort lingered. Joseph remained firm. He ignored Carol's outbursts, deleted her messages, and explained the situation to his colleagues and bosses. He decided not to involve the police for now, hoping Carol would eventually calm down. Clara was the only one Joseph felt comfortable confiding in. She gave him steady support, offering wise advice. She told him that Carol was simply seeking attention, and the best thing Joseph could do was ignore her behavior. Eventually, she would get tired and leave him alone. In the midst of the turmoil, good news came. Joseph was promoted to senior project manager. It was a big achievement, and he celebrated with his colleagues at a bar. Clara came to congratulate him as well. When they were alone, she kissed his cheek gently and told him how proud she was of him. Her closeness made Joseph's heart ache. It was then that he realized he was falling for her, and maybe, just maybe, she felt the same. They began spending more time together, not just as friends anymore. They went on dates, held hands, kissed, and felt the excitement and tenderness of getting to know each other on a deeper level. Despite the fear of starting a new relationship after their past failures, being with Clara made Joseph feel calm and certain that this was the way it was meant to be. He was even considering asking her to move in with him, but he hadn't yet found the right moment. Then, out of the blue, came a phone call from the hospital. Carol had been in a serious accident and was in the ICU. It turned out she wasn't alone when the crash happened. Carl, her lover, was with her and died at the scene. It was reported that Carol had been driving drunk again. Joseph felt a mix of shock, pity, anger over her reckless behavior, and guilt for not being able to help her. He went to the hospital, staying in the hallway all night, waiting for updates. In the morning, the doctor informed him that Carol had survived but was in a coma with severe injuries. It was uncertain if she would fully recover. Joseph's life had slowly begun to stabilize, and now this. He thought about Carol less and less, focusing on his work, his friends, and his newfound freedom. It still hurt, But he was stronger now, more focused on the positives. He felt like maybe this wasn't an end, but the start of something new. After the accident, Joseph's life divided into two parts. His relationship with Clara continued to grow. They spent almost all their free time together, discovering new things about each other. They both loved to travel, not just to relax on a beach, but to explore the history and culture of different places. They shared an interest in photography and could wander the streets for hours looking for the perfect shot. They also dreamed of starting their own little cafe or bookstore someday. With every passing day, Joseph fell deeper in love with Clara. He was grateful for her, for accepting him with all his past flaws and traumas. He wanted to do something special for her to show how much he cared. Soon, an opportunity came, Clara's birthday. Joseph arranged a surprise for her, a romantic dinner on a rooftop overlooking the city at night. He decorated with candles and flowers, ordered her favorite dishes, and at the end of the evening, gave her a ring. It wasn't an engagement ring yet, but a symbol of his love and commitment. Clara was moved to tears, saying she had never felt so happy and loved. They shared a tender embrace on the roof, under the stars, lost in each other and the moment. But in the back of Joseph's mind, there was still Carol, lying in a coma. He visited her almost daily, bringing flowers and reading her favorite books aloud. The doctor wasn't sure if Carol could hear him, but Joseph kept visiting, hoping his voice might help bring her back. Sometimes, Carol's mother would join him, crying at her daughter's bedside, asking Joseph for forgiveness for all that had happened. She told Joseph that now she understood how much he had loved Carol and how good he was. Joseph comforted her as best as he could, promising to take care of Carol. Clara, though understandably uncomfortable, supported Joseph through it all. She knew that for Joseph, helping Carol wasn't about love, but about doing the right thing. She went with Joseph to visit Carol and even helped care for her. Slowly, Carol's condition stabilized. Though she hadn't regained consciousness, the doctors no longer feared for her life. Hope started to grow that one day she might wake up. Joseph held on to that hope, but he knew that even if Carol woke up, she would never be the same. The damage, both physical and emotional, was too great. Then one day, while Joseph sat by her bedside, he thought he saw Carol's hand move. He froze, holding his breath, but it was gone in an instant. He leaned back in his chair, disappointed, but just as he did, Carol's eyes fluttered open. She blinked a few times, taking in her surroundings, and then stared at Joseph, whispering, "Forgive me." Carol's awakening shocked everyone. Joseph was filled with relief that she was alive and conscious. He cried tears of joy as he squeezed her weak hand. But at the same time, anxiety took hold. What would happen now? How would he, Carol, and Clara navigate this? Carol had a long road ahead. Her physical injuries were healing, but the emotional scars were deeper. She was plagued by nightmares, panic attacks, and guilt over Carl's death. She barely spoke to anyone and often stared into space. Joseph tried to be there for her, but he knew he couldn't give her everything she needed. Carol needed professional help, and her mother became her primary caregiver, moving into the hospital with her. They spent time together, crying, talking, and praying. For the first time, they were able to truly bond and forgive each other. Joseph continued to visit Carol, though less frequently, seeing her broken, withdrawn, and so different from the woman he once knew. But he knew it was his duty to be there for her, to remind her she wasn't alone. One day, Carol told Joseph, "I'm letting you go. You need to move on with your life. You deserve to be happy with Clara." Joseph broke down, burying his face in the hospital blanket. It was a bittersweet moment, finally letting go of the past, but gaining the freedom to move forward. Joseph and Clara's wedding was simple and intimate, attended only by their closest loved ones. They signed the papers at City Hall and then had a family dinner. Both radiated happiness, knowing that while challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Carol, still recovering, wasn't at the wedding, but she sent them a heartfelt letter wishing them joy and asking for their forgiveness. Joseph and Clara were deeply moved by her words and decided they would visit Carol together when she was ready. As time passed, life fell into a new rhythm. Joseph and Clara bought a small house in the suburbs, setting up their home. A year later, they had a beautiful baby girl, whom they named Hope. Joseph was an incredible father, patient, caring, always ready to play or read her a story. He often thought about his own father, wishing he could see him now, walking through life as a strong, loving man with a faithful partner. Carol, too, was learning to live again. After leaving the hospital, she went through a rehabilitation program. She discovered a love for painting, something she had abandoned years ago. Through her art, she began to heal and accept herself. Her paintings became filled with light and hope. One day, Carol held her first art exhibition in the city. Joseph and Clara attended with their daughter. Carol embraced them as family, showering their little girl with kisses. They spent time admiring her paintings, discussing their meaning, and then sat in a cafe, talking about the past, the future, and the healing process. In that moment, they all felt that the darkest chapters of their story had finally been closed. Ahead of them lay a blank page, ready for a new, unpredictable, and beautiful life.